My mother is the entitled parent in this story. Her and I have never had a great relationship. She resented me growing up because she was a single mom and never wanted children. She would never spend time or engage with me and would instead throw money at me to show she cared. Now I'm grown up and independent and just had a baby of my own, and she feels entitled to my son. I have made certain decisions about his upbringing that I'm trying to adhere to. Nothing crazy, just trying to avoid using unnecessary products on him. No baby lotion, no diaper cream, unless he gets a rash, homemade baby food, etc. He's now 4 months, and it has been working well for us. My mother is very insistent that she gets to see him 2 to 3 times a week. She refers to herself as Glamour, a mix of glam and grandma, and has already procured a few items that say best grandma ever. I have been very hesitant to let her watch him for extended periods of time. I didn't have the best upbringing and honestly believe she would not do what's best for my son. She has always been a very materialistic person and extremely concerned about the image she presents to other people. So I get anxiety thinking of him staying overnight at her place. She keeps asking for him to spend the night, saying she's doing it for me because I need the sleep. But I know it's because she likes the novelty of having a baby around. She first started asking for him to spend the night at her place when he was 2 weeks old. I have said no every time. When she was first allowed to babysit him, I had to set ground rules because she kept trying to plan parties whenever he was over. She was trying to show him off to all her friends and neighbors. The thing is, he is a baby. Large groups of people are not good for babies because their immune systems are weak, and our city has had a number of measles outbreaks. I had to tell her repeatedly that she couldn't be inviting groups of strangers over to pass him around like a doll. She finally agreed, and I let him spend a few hours at her place. Still, she kept asking for him to spend the night. She also calls me every day asking when he is going to visit her again and offering to take him off my hands for a few days, like he is an inconvenience. My husband had to go to BC for a wedding, so I was alone for a week. It was hard 6 days into it, and I was at the end of my rope. I had barely had any adult interaction and had only slept 3 hours a day. So I call my mother up and ask her if my son and I can spend the night at her place. I needed sleep, but didn't want to leave him there without me all night. I figured this would be a good compromise. I would be available if anything went wrong, and she would get off my back about him staying over. She had been nagging me for weeks about how I should just give him pablum, and he would sleep through the night. He was a preemie and our pediatrician said to wait for solids, but she thought she knew best. I had to constantly tell her not to feed him anything but his milk. The night came where I was supposed to go to her place. I get there and there are 15 other people over. Turns out she was having a dinner party. Whether or not she had this arranged before I asked to come over, I don't know. I told her my son goes to bed at 8 and you really needed to sleep. She assured me everyone would be gone by 9. That didn't happen. They ended up starting a bonfire and she's trying to get me to sit by the fire with my son. I tell her I don't want him around all that smoke. He's only 4 months old, so he needs to stay in the house. Besides, it's 8 and he needs to go to bed. She tells me I'm being unreasonable and should just let him sleep by the fire. I put my foot down and say no. He ends up in his bassinet and I'm waiting for the party to be done so I can sleep. Because my husband has been gone and I have been dealing with the babe on my own for 6 days, my sleep schedule has been completely out of whack. I was hoping to take some sleeping pills to get a good night's rest since she was going to eat HM through the night. So now I'm waiting for her to come in and take over for me. 10 rolls around and she pops in for a drink before heading back out. I ask her again how late the party is going to go since I'm desperate to get some sleep. She tells me it should be over soon, again, and that she can't stay in the house because she has guests over and she needs to entertain them. 10:45 comes and she's still at the bonfire. Again she comes in to grab something and she sees that I'm still up. She tells me I'm being silly and should just go to sleep. She doesn't seem to understand that I have insomnia and need to take sleeping pills and can't do that until someone else can watch my son. The someone being her, since I asked and she offered. I remind her that I was there to sleep and was waiting on her. She then tells me I'm being ungrateful since she had this party planned and she couldn't just ask everyone to leave. She said I should just go to sleep and not worry about my son so much. I tell her she can't be taking care of him if she's outside. She wouldn't even hear him if he woke up. She said I should stop stressing, that people will leave soon, and went back to her party. 11:30 comes around, and I'm so tired I start crying. I can't sleep, and I wasn't getting the help I asked for. I decide to just take my son and go home. If I was doing it on my own, I'd rather be around my own things, and in my own bed. I pack him up, and send her a text saying she was too preoccupied to watch my son that we were going home. She didn't even see my message until 12:30. How well could she have watched him if she didn't leave her bonfire until then? I ended up getting a string of messages saying it was unfair of me to take him away. That I shouldn't say she didn't care because she spent $700 on him that day, so obviously she cared. I never mentioned anything about caring or not caring. She said I was being ungrateful because if I had stayed we would have been able to sleep in the morning while she took care of him. I don't trust for 1 minute that she would have done right by him. Her guests were taking up all her time. A week goes by and she asks twice again if he can stay the night at her place. I have no faith in her watching him overnight, but I agree to let her watch him during the day Saturday. She says she's going to sleep in, but should pick him up around 9 or 10. 11 rolls around, and I haven't heard from her. I give her a call and she says she just got home, and that they can't pick him up until later, so I should just drop him off at her place. She was supposed to pick him up, because she lives 30 minutes out of town on an acreage, but drives right past our house when she goes shopping. I try telling her it is too inconvenient to drive him to her place, I'll just keep him with me. But she wears me down, and I eventually make the drive out to her place. I tell her I'll pick him up in the evening around 9:30 or 10. At 5 I get a text from her saying she's decided to have a bonfire and has invited a bunch of people over. Seriously? The exact same thing as the week before. And tell her again I don't want my son sitting out in the hot sun or hanging around the smoke from the fire. I tell her I don't care what she does, but I will pick up my son if she can't watch him. She tells me she is watching him and that I don't need to take him. I go to get him, and I pissed off. I have asked her time and again not to have him around groups of strangers, but to have him around smoke, and she just won't listen. I did even want to send him to her place, but she just kept nagging that she should watch him. So I planned my day around him being with her, and then had to cancel a D&D game in the middle of the session because she couldn't respect my wishes. When I pick him up she starts yelling that I'm being ungrateful. She was doing a great job watching him and how much all her guests are loving him. She tells me that I'm unreasonable and rude. To top it off she tells me that she's going to tell my baba about my behavior and that baba will give me a talking to. What the fuck, woman? I should have no better than to try and trust her. She insists on babysitting my dog every weekend. He has pancreatitis and can't eat fatty foods. He gets extremely sick, but she ignores when I say this and continues to feed him bacon because he like it. If she can't take care of a dog, how the hell did I think she could take care of a child? And the worst is how she keeps acting like a victim, saying I'm treating her unfairly. Man, I really needed to get this off my chest. So myself and my girlfriend were coming back from Paris after my brother's wedding. We took the Eurostar both ways, but on the way there we went standard class. My girlfriend and I were paying for the return and thought that we'd go for it by upgrading to standard premier, which was slightly more expensive than normal standard, but we don't go to Paris very often. There was a third option, business premier, but we are not made of money. The main differences between standard and standard premier are that with standard it's pretty cramped, and with standard premier you get extra leg room, and with regular standard you have to go and buy food on board, but with standard premier you get food and drinks at your seat. The different options are divided into different carriages. Standard is carriages 1 to 5, premier is 7 to 12, and 14 to 18 are also standard. GF and I get to the train. Our seats are in a carriage towards the middle, and we are in one of the rows nearest the door. We get settled in our seats, ready to leave, when M approaches. All paraphrasing. M seemed nice at first, but it didn't last. M, excuse me? Me, yes. I'm terribly sorry to ask you this. I hope you don't mind. GF, yes. My daughter and I are traveling, and we got put a bit far back. She has a bad leg. We need to be a bit closer to the doors and we can't be getting up to get food and drink. GF. Oh, poor her. I broke my leg a couple years back, and that was awful. Had to have crutches and everything. How old is she? She's 8. She's really in a bad way, but she's such a trooper. It would just be so much easier if we were a bit further forward. Me, where are you sat? Just a little further back. She gestures vaguely behind us, and I get suspicious at this point. Me, yeah, but where specifically? What carriage number? I think it was 3. Now, we were in coach 10. This is a significant distance. Additionally, coach 3 is standard seating only. Me, isn't 3 standard class? Well, yes, but my daughter needs these seats. GF. Catching on to M's plan. Look, we are not unsympathetic, but we sort of paid extra for these seats. Me, also where is your kid? I'm going back for her once I've sorted the seats. So can I tell her it's sorted? Me, we've not agreed to anything. Isn't coach 3 closer to the front than 10? If it's about proximity, wouldn't you be better off in coach 2? No, she needs the legroom too. And she can't keep getting up to help. You look like you can afford it. Me, not really. We are only splashing out this once as it was my brother's wedding. Huffs, look, are you going to give me the seats or not? GF. In this oversweet voice she does that usually indicates she's on her last nerve with someone. It sounds like you're actually further up than we are. If legroom is an issue then I'm sure we can speak to someone. I'm pretty sure your coach has priority boarding. I'll help you find someone. Sort something out. It's really no trouble. GF gets up and leads M back to her coach, with M grumbling the whole time. GF comes back about 5 minutes later and tells me that the daughter, who was not at all entitled, is also totally fine and in no way has a bad leg. Apparently the daughter straight up ran up to M and my GF when they came in the carriage, and GF said that the kid was way too young to be left on her own, and they were actually pretty close to the front of the train. But nothing else happened after that. No stopping, calling police, assault of any kind. M just went back to her seat, but GF and I thought we saw her walk through the carriage before us a little while later and speak to someone in there, so maybe she was trying again with someone else. So I worked at a pretty well-known and popular aquarium over the summer. Usually my job was great, and the kids are always enthusiastic about learning about our cool animals, and the parents are usually just as enthusiastic. We had the occasional rude guest, but my summer there was great until my very last day. We had a standard one section of the aquarium where we had cool shark teeth, jaws, and a skull to show kids who were interested. We even had a really cool megalodon tooth that was really popular with the guests. Anyway, enter Ep and her 2 daughters. I want to call them SK1 and SK2 because they were genuinely very sweet the whole time and seemed to be getting very embarrassed by their mother. SK1 is the older sister, but they seemed about the same age, maybe 11 to 12. The ages, I think, are pretty important to the story. Now, I want to note, before I go into it, that Ep doesn't think she's entitled to any objects or anything in this story. No, instead she was entitled to wasting my time and tried to make a fool/example out of me to her daughters. So now, into the story. They walk up to my stand and I greet them and go through my whole script of what each tooth was, where they came from, talked about the jaws, the number of teeth they have, etc. Things were going great until I started telling the kids about the meg tooth. SK1 was holding it and seemed in awe of its size, and I told her there was no need to worry about seeing it in the oceans, as it is extinct. She then asks me how/when it went extinct, and I told her that, well, we don't know the exact year that it died, but it outlived the meteor that killed the dinosaurs, as it went extinct due to lack of prey millions of years ago. She and SK2 immediately had a confused look on their face and said, "Meteor? What meteor?" I was a little surprised and said, "You know, the meteor that killed the dinosaurs?" And they both shook their head. I was shocked as I said, these girls were both preteens, and they had never heard of the meteor. I was about to tell them about it, when Ep jumped in. She immediately announced, "Oh, we never heard of that story before." I asked them what story they had heard instead, and SK1 excitedly said, "The flood." At this point, I was just thinking, oh no, but continued on, since part of my job was educating people about our animals and fossils. I told them that the flood they were talking about happened much later than the meteor, and that was the thing that had killed humans. The meteor killed the dinosaurs. They asked how, so I told them it hit the earth, and it caused the entire planet to be covered with ash. Volcanoes were erupting, etc., and that it made the planet unlivable for a lot of life on Earth, and things started to die as a result. At this point, Ep starts laughing like the whole concept was absurd. She tells me that, no, that is just a theory. So I tell her that actually, we have proof that it happened. There is a thick layer in Earth's crust that has a specific chemical Macleod due to the result of the meteor, and that all dinosaur bones we find are in that layer or lower. And she tells me that again, no, that is just a theory. I was pretty taken aback by that comment, seeing as I told her she could literally dig down right now and find the layer I was talking about, and that people have literally seen it with their own eyes, but somehow, it was still theoretical. Whatever, I didn't want to argue with the lady, since her kids were right there, and it was clear she was the type of person that couldn't be convinced because they're crazy, but she kept pushing. She said that there is scientific proof that the world is only 3,000 years old, so there couldn't have been a shark alive millions of years ago, despite her daughter literally holding a tooth from one. I told her that actually, no, there's scientific proof that it is millions of years old. And she said, no, that's just a theory. Again. She then told me I should educate myself and read some scientific articles on it. This is where it got even worse. I just said, ma'am, I have read many scientific papers on this topic. I studied biology in graduate this year. I've had to read several papers on this exact topic. Ep, well, clearly you aren't reading real papers. There is proof that the Earth is only 3,000 years old. Plus, no one was alive millions of years ago to prove that it is any older than this. You're looking into the wrong stuff. You should really look into creationism. My blood was pretty much boiling at this point because I had to contain my anger. See, I'm considered a cast member where I work, and part of my job is to keep up a chipper attitude and smile a lot. So I was trying to do this while also answering this Ep's crazy questions and hopefully getting through to her poor kids. So I literally start explaining carbon dating to her. Me, I have looked into creationism. I'm a confirmed Catholic and know all about the flood. You aren't telling me anything new. But that would have happened much later than the meteor. And even as a Catholic, I know that there is hard evidence that the Earth is millions of years old. We know this because we can carbon date the bones we find. Ep starts laughing. That's just a theory. Everything you are saying is just a theory. Me, no, actually it's not. I know exactly how carbon dating works as I have had to use it in school. It's essentially a mathematical formula that tells us the age of something because we know how long it takes for carbon to decay. Now, this whole time, SK1 and 2 have been standing there with their heads down, touching all the teeth I had laid out for them. When I said this, SK1 popped her head up and said, oh, like they do with trees? How they can count the rings and know how old they are. I was so relieved when I heard this because it sounded like the poor girl was listening more to me than she was to Ep. So I put on the biggest smile I could and said, kind of. It's a bit different, but it's the same concept. Yeah. We can tell how old things are without being there for their whole lives. Just like with trees. These animals don't have rings to count though, so we have to test them another way. This girl was smiling and nodding along and looked super excited about the concept of dinosaurs until Ep cut in again, telling me how I was wrong and that once again, everything I was saying was theory. I told her that no, this was not theory. The thing she was thinking of was probably the theory of evolution, which yes, is still technically a theory, though honestly anyone with a functioning brain and basic understanding of biology would agree that we definitely evolved into being as a species, but that this was not at all the same thing. She just shook her head and violently started scrolling through her phone to find some of her research she said existed. She then became exasperated and turned to SK2 and said, "What was that man's website again?" And then started talking about their pastor's website or a website he had stumbled upon or something. I internally groaned at that one. Her proof was some random website on the internet. That was the proof she was arguing against me with. A website that literally anyone can make. SK2 just shrugged and immediately looked back down and continued to feel the teeth I had out. Ep realized she couldn't find her proof and just said, "Well, there's proof of what I'm saying, and what you're saying has just been disproved as a theory. So again, you should just look into creationism." I just gave up at that point and nodded and said, "I already have, but okay. Have a nice day." As soon as she left, my stand got swarmed by a couple new families ready to see the teeth. She had literally been giving off such an aura that it caused other people to stay away from the stand. It was ridiculous. Thankfully, the next family that came over, the dad had a Jurassic Park shirt on, so that at least gave me some relief. I just really hope that those girls go to college for biology or something, or at least learn about these things in high school. Right now, I just feel so bad for them, and I'm so angry at Ep for keeping something so big from her children. I can't imagine what other things those poor girls have never heard of, and I get that in the US we have religious freedom, but making your kids so ignorant to huge facts and sheltering them to this point should honestly be viewed as child abuse. If you enjoyed the stories, slap the like and subscribe button for more of them, and don't forget to support the original writers with an upvote. Links are in the description. Peace out, and catch you tomorrow.